Hi, my name is Alex Feisley, and today we're going to be talking about adding Egress to your Netmaker network. So Egress is how you can reach remote networks via a device in your Netmaker network without having to install endpoints on all those devices at the site. So for instance, let's say an office network. You can access the whole office network remotely using a single device installed at that site, sort of like a router. This could also be used at an edge site, a retail location, a factory. It really doesn't matter as long as you have a device at that site which can reach the local network. And then once you have that set up, you'll be able to get remote access to that network securely. So in my Netmaker network, I have added two additional devices. I have Site Linux 1, Site Linux 2, which represents two Linux boxes running at a remote site. So let's go ahead and set those as egress to that remote site. So I'm going to add a route. I'm going to say remote site network. And let's say this is edge location. And you have this option to enable NAT. In most places, you're going to do that unless you're setting up some special NAT rules. But typically, you're not going to do that. So then here, you're just going to put in that local network. And then you're going to add the nodes that will act as routers into that local network. So you could just have one or two if you want redundancy. So I'm using two here. So if one goes down, the other is going to take over routing that traffic, but you only need one. Last, we have access control policies for what is able to access this route. So we'll go into access controls a bit later. For right now, I'm just going to say that basically all network users can reach it and then just finish that up. So for now, any users who join the network, they'll be able to access these routes. And that's really it. You can add additional routes to those devices. So let's say we only want to reach an IoT device on site. So let's say you've got a camera running at 192.168, what do we call that, 57, and then maybe that's like .45 there. So then you could go ahead and also add that to a device, and then it will route to that individual device. And then, of course, you'll add that access policy. Maybe you want a specific network for it to be reachable, or maybe just an individual user can manage that. But that's going to be it. So that's basically how you set up your egress. Now, there is one other option I want to go through. So this requires a Linux device with the Netclient installed. You have one other option, which is to use the WireGuard config file, which is a little bit more difficult to understand. So if you recall, I had this edge server set up with a WireGuard config file in the previous tutorial. So I actually want to use that to set up access to a local network. So I'm going to edit this config file and go into my advanced settings. And here you can see you can add additional addresses. So maybe this is a local network, let's say 10.5.0.0. So whatever that is, you're going to add that in. And you have the option to add in post up and post down routing commands. This can be used with WG-Quick, but if you're not using WG-Quick, you'll need to set up the routing locally. So you're going to need something that forwards the traffic. So one option here is maybe you're installing this directly on a router and you're going to use that to forward traffic into the local network. So that's a great use case here, is to have this set up with additional addresses and then place the config on a router and then use that to forward traffic locally. But here I'm just using a WireGuard config file. So I'm just going to add my post up, post down forwarding commands. And then one thing really worth noting here is once this file is updated, you can see we have egress added there, you are going to need to update that config file locally, obviously, since this is just a static config file. So we're just going to take that and copy it and go back to our local device. So this is our edge server. I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. Well, actually, we need to do down. All right, so we're deleting that existing file. Then we're going to create a new one and insert that configuration, which contains the new routes. So that should be showing in the allowed IPs now. And it's also got that post up, post down. Okay, and then we just go ahead and apply that file, and then we're updated. And that's about it. So those are the two methods for adding egress. You can either use our Netclient and add that directly in our add route section here, or on our config files, you can create a config file with advanced settings where you set additional routes. So that's under egress here, and you'll add that in, and then you'll just need to make sure you add forwarding. So that's it, and I'll see you in the next video.